Hey everyone, this is Bo. In this video, I tackle a house project where we are replacing a laundry cart in our laundry room. The existing one is here on the right. It is plastic, and it actually came when we bought the house, and so it slides in between the washer and dryer, and it holds laundry detergent, bleach, fabric softener, dryer sheets, all the stuff that you need to do laundry. The problem is, with it being plastic and having pretty heavy things on top, it would actually lean and just lean itself against the washer or dryer. So the plan was to set out to build something similar in size and shape, because it has to fit inside the gap between the washer and dryer and laundry room, but was of course more sturdy and able to support the weight of all the things on it. So here's the finished laundry cart here. It is made from ash hardwood, and then half-inch plywood for the top and middle shelf, and then two laminated pieces of half-inch plywood for the bottom shelf. Mostly mortise and tenons here on the side panel, and then the front and back panel, and then those are all glued together via a rabbet. And then that rabbet is reinforced with kind of 45-degree glue blocks on the inside here to really hold that all together. The overall design here was I did lower the top shelf a bit to try to get the weight of the more commonly used laundry detergent and bleach down lower, so it wouldn't be as susceptible to rocking or toppling over. And then I did really beef up the bottom of the unit here for the casters attached, because they attach to the bottom shelf, and as well if I have to add any ballast to make it more stable. I don't think so, but I'm going to go into the laundry room here and put all the stuff on it and see how stable it is. Alright, so I have everything loaded up. And it's not very topply at all, actually. It's pretty good. Slides right in here. The other thing that I was trying to achieve with the cart was that the laundry detergent and everything was actually below the surface here. So as you're moving laundry baskets from side to side or transferring clothes from side to side, they're not getting caught on the bottles. So yeah, overall fits really nice. Looks good. Holds everything. Alright, so that pretty much wraps up the intro. The build details are coming up. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments section of the video, or you can visit my website, www.bobuilt.com, for any other details that might be in the web page there, the blog post. Thanks for watching. Appreciate it.
To get started here, we are rough cutting all of the pieces to length on the chop saw. I have my cut list up on the left there on a piece of paper, and now we are going to rip the half-inch plywood down to width to make it a little more manageable. Later on I will cross-cut this to length once I get some of the mortise and tenons laid out and get some more of the shelf dimensions finalized before I cut it all to final size. Next up is rough cutting everything to width. I've seen this process before in my videos. I like to use the bandsaw to do this and get it close, just because the pieces can sometimes be warped or bowed or twisted, and this is to me this is a much safer option when you're cutting rough lumber. After rough cutting everything to width, I take it over to the joiner, where I'm going to flatten one surface, and I'm going to joint one edge 90 degrees to that surface. And you saw me at the beginning there applying some paraffin wax to the surface of the joiner bed, just to help with friction and whatnot. After jointing, I like to surface plane the boards to common thickness. So here I'm passing through the longer boards, which are the vertical sections for for all 4 sides. Of course, I also do the shorter sides because I want them to be the same thickness as well. And the last part of the dimensioning process, well, I shouldn't say that. The second to last part of the dimensioning process is to rip them to their final width, which in this case varies depending on the component, but it's anywhere from 1.5 inches to 4.5 inches. And now for the actual last part of the dimensioning process is cutting everything to their final length, making sure to account for tenons and whatnot. You can see here I have a stop block set up on the left, cutting all these long pieces to a repeatable length. And then as I move on to the next, I double check my plan. And there we go. This is the next size. And I roughly set my stop block to location, do a double check with the measurement. I then will square off one edge of the piece, mark it, and I will line up my saw to make sure that the stop block is in the right position and measure it again. That is a lot of measuring and double checking and triple checking, but want to make sure it's the right size. And here I am laying out the tenons for all the cross pieces. And after I lay out the tenons and their locations on the horizontal components, I will use them to lay out the mortises. And so you see here I have the upper and lower horizontal pieces laid out. And now I'm doing some math on my phone there to understand what the spacing would be between these middle components. And so I'm putting those middle components into place, and I am then marking the locations of the mortises. Once I get them marked and I'm happy with their locations, everything looks good, I'll take off the clamps, kind of strip the horizontal pieces out of there, and then I will use those first 2 pieces as my what I'll call a master, and I will transfer all those locations to the remaining pieces. Instead of doing a bunch of measurements and maybe getting something wrong by an inch or a half an inch or whatever, I just line everything up and I strike a perpendicular line across them all just so they stay consistent. The one thing to keep in mind is I like to denote what is the top and the bottom for these pieces, just so if there is a little bit of difference, like non-symmetry, if you will, that I know what the top and bottom is to keep them consistent. So the next step is to cut the shoulders for the tenons. Doing that in a table saw. It's actually my mom doing that in a table saw. She came to visit and she was helping me out one day. After cutting the shoulders, move on to the cheeks, which I've come to like doing on a router table with a very fine adjustment. It's easy to dial in a good tenon fit, and using a coping sled makes it safe and easy to do. As my mom was cutting the tenons, I was actually making mortises in all these vertical pieces. So after they're done, I round the corners of the tenons with a file and a chisel, and then I chamfer the edge of the tenon with either a block plane or shoulder plane, whatever I have handy, and then I start the test fit process. Looks a little tight the first time. Might have been some junk in the mortise there that I'm cleaning out. And then I move on to just adjusting the tenon. If the mortise walls look good, it's the tenon that I always adjust. So here we go. Another test fit. Looks good, lines up. High five. Once I get all the tenons fitting nicely, I make sure to mark them all. And then I do a dry fit of the 4 individual frame pieces. I get everything lined up, clamped together, and then I take the dimensions for the shelves and the panels. I've cut the panels the final size, and here I'm routing the tongues in all the edges of the panels. One of the last things to make are the corner supports. These are the glue blocks cut at 45 that'll reinforce the rabbet joints. Using my bandsaw here at 45 with just a piece of wood as a fence.
So I have some good news and some bad news. Good news is I've made a lot of progress on the laundry cart. Bad news is I've done a pretty poor job of capturing some of the details on video. So I wanted to take a few minutes here and talk through some of the construction details of the cart that are probably hard to pick out from the miscellaneous build footage. So I have the cart kind of torn apart here on the bench, but I want to talk through each of the pieces respectively. So here is what would be the front and the back of the laundry cart. These will be, facing out from the wall. This is what you're going to see. And so what we have here is these 4 horizontal pieces that are mortised and tenoned into these vertical ones, and then plywood panels. Kind of exploding that and looking at that, what the construction looks like. Here is one of the vertical pieces. And you can see you got the mortise cut here, and then we have a groove for the panel cut in between them. And the groove does not extend all the way through. I stopped it short because the groove positioning for the panel is different than where the mortise was. So I didn't want to go all the way through and screw up the wall of the mortise. So on the router table, I had the bit marked with masking tape. I'd set this down onto it, slide it to my mark on the piece, lift it up, go to the next groove, continue. For the horizontal pieces, it's the same router table setup, but you can go all the way through from end to end. I set the height, or I should say the depth of my groove based on the tenons, so I didn't cut any tenon away. That's just where I set my depth. And then the plywood panels, they fit in the grooves, of course. And these were plywood, 1/2-inch plywood. And once again, I used the router table and trimmed off front and back side of the tongue, so it fits snugly in here. And then one last thing too is since I didn't cut all the way through to the mortises, I had to notch corners of the plywood panels so they would, fit around that area. That one fits real tight. Yeah, so you can kind of see here how it maybe kind of goes around where that mortise is at. So that's a good fit there. One mistake I made is if you see here, you see the tenon sticking out. When I cut the rabbet that's going to join the left and right to the front and back, I cut it a little too deep, a little deeper than I should have, and it went into where the mortise and tenon were at. Not the end of the world. I used the shoulder plane, just knocked down the tenons, so then the side panels can fit tightly in there. Speaking of the side panels, so that's these here. This would be the left and right side, and they were going to go in this rabbet. These side panels are made up of 3 horizontal pieces that all have grooves cut in them, and those grooves are to hold the shelves. So we got 2 1/2-inch shelves, top and middle, and then I have a full inch shelf on the bottom. And the reason for the full inch shelf is because that is what the wheels are going to attach to. And so there's going to be all the weight and load of the laundry cart and all the laundry supplies going through this lower shelf. So I've doubled it up, and as well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a glue block right above the shelf here, like so. And so not only will I have the groove taking some of the shear load, but as well this glue block, which I will glue onto the side panels here, and then I'll screw the shelf from the bottom up into these glue blocks. One other area I wanted to address and strengthen up was the joint between the side panel and the front panel. So with just a rabbet joint, it's pretty strong with today's glue, but I was worried with the amount of times of pulling it in and out and the amount of weight on it and what would happen. So what I'm going to do is I've cut these little triangular pieces of stock out, And after I glue the rabbet in place, I'm then going to come back in and glue these triangular pieces in there and then clamp them in. So a lot of glue surface, not only the rabbet joint, but then you have each surface of this glued to the halves of the joint. So should be very strong, no worried about separation on the top rabbet. Just to give you a look at the side panels kind of taken apart here. They're nothing really too special, just once again, Morrison tenon joinery holding it all together. Next up, I guess, is going to be a lot of sanding. I am going to be able to clamp up the side panels. Since they don't have any frames in them, I can clamp them up and sand them as a unit and finish them as a unit. After that, a dry fit, a lot of masking of where the joints are going to be, because this is going to get painted and I have to paint it before assembly. Since it's such a narrow piece, it's going to be hard to get in there and paint after assembly. So got to take a lot of time and a lot of tedious work of masking all the joinery and then finish it. And then after that, attach the casters and away we go. So I'm going to get back to it, start tearing all these pieces apart and get sanding.
And as I mentioned, here I am masking off all the areas that need glue prior to paint. So I'm using the triangular pieces to as my guide to cut out the masking tape. And it's kind of hard to make out, but I also have the pieces that will be rabbeted into place in there as well, clamped in place. You kind of see them sticking up vertically. It's hard to see with the masking tape. I suppose you could say it's masking its view. Alright, here are just some still shots of the paint progress. You can see masking off a lot of the areas where the Morrison tenons will go, as well as the rabbets and all the other glue surfaces. At this point in time, everything's gotten one coat of primer and 2 coats of white top coat. It's Benjamin Moore Advance. Alright, time to move up onto the glue up. The video is joining about halfway in here. I've already got glue in the joints, and now I'm just trying to get everything lined up and put into place. I've got rags taped to the clamping surfaces to try to help with, to prevent marring. You know, it's a little bit of prevention, but still not perfect. You'll still end up with a little bit of marks, and later on I have to touch them up. And here I am removing the masking tape, which is always satisfying. And it also looks like I've gotten a haircut. So probably the one part of the project that didn't go as planned was this glue up. I thought gluing the rabbet together would have been, I don't know, a little less complicated, not as many clamps required to get that joint tight. But it did take quite a few clamps, and unfortunately the joints weren't perfect. And then here you can see where I have to touch up some paint where the masking doesn't exactly match the finished pieces. This is also after I glued in those triangular corner blocks. These little artist paintbrushes work awesome for doing this. And so here is the top part of the unit with those corner blocks installed, all the paint touched up, and ready to go. And then here's the bottom of it. You can see the casters are installed, as well as those screws that are running through the bottom shelf and into those glue blocks I installed to really strengthen up that lower shelf. Here it is standing up in its finished form with a little bit of air gap on the bottom there. And then here's the front and rear panel, or at least the front panel, and then it's also sitting next to the old laundry cart. So that basically wraps up the build video. I appreciate everyone watching. If you stay tuned, you can watch Bo the Neanderthal try to disassemble the old plastic cart. It wasn't a very strong cart, I'll tell you, but for the life of me, I could not figure out how to take it apart into its individual pieces. It had me stumped. No amount of hammering or pulling or twisting or prying could lodge the shelves from the end units. So, yeah. What do you get when you mix an elephant with a rhinoceros? Elfino. Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a good one.